Hello! Welcome to Waiting for Game, a podcast presented by Melee Stats. I'm your host, Give Me That Wheat, and we are here today to talk about Riptide, big Midwest major, basically representing kind of all of the Midwest, especially with their really cool crew battle here. So we have someone who I think has an insane knowledge of not only the Midwest, but also just like a great knowledge of a lot of the in-game minutia, and just like one of the people who is like brimming with knowledge every time you see them talk online. I am, of course, talking about my good friend Edwin Budding. How's it going, Edwin?
It's going great, Wheat. I'm so excited to jump into Riptide, to jump into the top 100 update this week. And I'm really happy to not just talk about it with you, but also talk about it with our wonderful guest, SSB Seal. Seal, how's it going?
It's going good. But, guys, I think I made a mistake coming on the podcast today. I've just realized I'm not going to be able to listen to it on my drive home from Riptide. I'm not going to have that 2 hours of content to bring me home.
It could be under two. Could be under
That's
2 hours.
That's true. But yeah, I'm doing great. Happy to be back on the podcast. Last time was just Edwin and I, so we got a nice group of three this time.
Yeah, I'm happy to get to speak to you and happy to give you the opportunity to speak to someone else. So you and Edwin on the podcast for 2 hours. Sounds interesting. But I'm here as a little buffer zone. But yeah, before we get to Riptide, obviously Riptide's going to be kind of the focus of this episode. But we got some small stuff coming up. So as you might have seen for any of those who follow me, the Twitter was a buzz today with talk of the top 100, of course. What else but the news of some of the small things about the top 100 that got finalized. So of course that we're going to see the season is going to last up until DreamHack Atlanta. That is December 17th is the last day. So we're going to get basically a couple more months of this. We've got like 3 more months of tournaments to kind of place everyone within that frame. And just to be clear, we basically have kept it the same as we did last year and as MPGR and SSBM rank always have, but we're doing 3 majors as the requirement, or 2 majors with significant data through regionals. Unfortunately, the Mango system might have to wait for another day. Now, Edwin, you and I were talking about this. You did a little research on the Edwin system, on the Mango system. What do you think about this proposed system? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I want to kind of just zoom out for a second. I'm going to talk about something in the abstract, maybe something very universal, right? And I think whenever something is in the public sphere and it's supposed to represent a community, I think everybody who consumes that bit of content or that bit of media wants to feel like not just the fact that they're represented, but they want to make their voice heard. I encourage that everybody who engages with the rankings in some semblance understand that, or I encourage that they all make their voice heard. And I appreciate the fact that everybody wants their voice to be heard or to be represented in some sorts in the rankings, right? So when Mango suggests something like the Mango system, where he believes that, that this many amount of tournaments should be the standard if you want to qualify for the list or different portions of the list, and you get to pick and choose which of your best tournaments are selected, or a panel selects your best tournaments. I understand that this is his perspective on the rankings, right? And it comes from a place of being a top 10 player and or whatever, and feeling like his input into the rankings and his perspective on how they should be done should be the way it happens. But unfortunately, the top 100 is with 100 people, right? So I think what may seem like reasonable activity requirements to make a major for one group of players, like the tippy top ones or the ones in the top 10 or whatever, is not necessarily going to translate to the vast majority of players that are going to be on the list. And frankly, the majority of players that we're trying to represent and market through this kind of list, right? So while 5 or 6 majors may not sound like a lot for a player at the top level, for the entirety of the list, we're talking about people who could maybe only, like, there's a large portion of players who can only go to maybe like 2 or 3 majors a year with regionals or local data, God forbid, providing the rest of their data set that goes to the panelists. And I think one of the really cool things with the ranking system, the way that we do it, and the way that we do it with an informed panel, is that we take all these things into consideration, right? This is not a one size fits all type approach that we're trying to take. We're trying to take something that's very case by case. We're trying to, create a range of possible, eligibility requirements that ensure that all types of players are captured within this, right? Not just people at the very top, or not just a small selection of players. So that's something that I think is reflected in this update speech, or this update announcement. Not just the fact that
it's a speech.
Yeah, I suppose not just the fact that we have a final tournament for the ranking period, but the fact that we have a relatively loose major eligibility requirements. And I think historically speaking, this is the approach we've always taken, as far as ensuring that enough people are able to be put on the ballot with notable results so that we can come up with a functional list. I think the problem is when you come up with this really strict criteria on either what counts or what should count, or how much is enough to be counted, you end up excluding a lot of people, and you end up getting rid of a massive part of the range of potential players that you can select to create a top 100 list. So when I hear talk about how it's vague or how it's unclear, it's not necessarily a problem. It's intentionally done so that we can capture a large portion of players that are able to be represented on this list. Seal, you've been watching Melee for quite a bit. You know what kind of players tend to show up at majors, or from top level to people contending for a top 100. Let me ask you something. Does this appear in your mind, from your years of experience watching the scene and going to tournaments? Does this appear to be true, or do you think that a one size fits all approach is the way, or that there should only be this 5 or 6 best tournaments per player, or whatever? What do you think?
Yeah, I know. I think it's clear pretty much to anyone that's like in touch with a lot of the contenders, so to say, people maybe within the 50 to 100 range, or the people just outside of that range even, that it's just not really reasonable to expect them to be able to make it to that many majors. Of course, the sponsored top players, they have funding from their organizations, their teams, their streams, whereas other people are probably just either struggling to get the PTO approved, or trying to scrape together the funds at a part-time job. So there's just so many people, especially, like, I'm sure we'll talk about some today here in the Midwest, that just are only able to get out to maybe like 3 majors a year, if that even.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a difficult journey to try to capture all these different individual players that not only, are different skill levels, but interact with the game so differently, so it's definitely interesting. And I love when people come up with ideas, because I think that it's good to have different ideas. I sometimes the ideas come at the expense of us somehow. Like, sometimes the idea is like, here's an idea that these virgin losers couldn't think of, and it's like, what? come on, guys.
And then you have to hear it from all the fans.
True. But yeah, no, it's an interesting thing. I do think that, like, we talked about before, not on the podcast. I'm realizing now that it was on Radio Melee. But I talked about the idea of, like, well, what if you did different parameters for different sections, right? I think that's what is commonly said when we say the well-trodden response of, we're making a list that has to account for 100 as much as it does number 1. And the response to that is like, well, what if you had different parameters for the top 10? And I'm like, that obviously the difference between 99 and 100 and 1 and number 2 is probably more important. So I'm going to go on a limb. But yeah, it's just like adding all these different things, right? We already have 30 some people who, make these ballots. There's a lot of, like, when you open stuff up to this, there's a lot of logistics. There's already logistics in terms of what counts as what, right? What's a regional, what's a major, what's a local. Off season is something that, I did some talking to top players who were going, both as a invited player and as a player who had to go through the open bracket, talked to some of the members of Optic who were running it. And it's just like, it's so crazy that the idea of, like, having to do that for all these tournaments to determine, this one counts, this one doesn't. Like, and it's just I don't even know what's the logical endpoint for this. Mango's seventh best tournament, he loses to Jmook, so he doesn't have a Jmook loss. What does Jmook have a Mango win? Because what if that happened at one of Jmook's six best tournaments, right? Like, what the ideas here I think are interesting, and it's just one of those things where it's like, let me see it, right? If you want to prove that this is what we should be doing, I'm sure there's a way to do that other than just like sight unseen change it that it has been for the past 10 years or whatever. Regardless, I do think that alternate rankings that like try to have a very different approach, I think could have a place in the scene, right? This isn't necessarily a monopoly. I don't know if we'll get to a point where something other than SSBM rank is going to be considered as official. But I still think that like if we're going to have ideas, run it, right? Might as well show a proof of concept out there. Like these that could create stuff that then affects SSBM rank in some way, right? Even if it's just not a wholesale change, but like if there is an idea that is shown and you like, you take your hypothesis and you put it to action, maybe, who knows? But yeah, we talk about the top 100, right? And we talk about it as a list of 100 players. And see, I think you're right. When you talk about it, it's insanely just like what's the best word for this? Not foolish, but it's just like it's a little wrong to imagine that 100 players are going to like 6 majors a year or 1 major a month or whatever like is floated around when these conversations talk about. And if you did make a list of the top 100 best players with a 6 major requirement, like Danger's probably in the 70s, right? like the list might not be exactly what we think it is, but you're right. We've got a lot of great players who only show up at certain things, and the Midwest I think is a region that specifically embodies kind of what Edwin's talking about, right? This idea of it being vague, and the idea that we're not coming out and saying like Riptide is an A-tier major. You must attend at least 3 A-tier majors or 1 S-tier major if you attend 1 B-tier. Like the reason why we don't do this is because everyone's kind of got different stuff going on, and if you attend 3 majors, then like that might be the same amount of data as someone attending 2 majors and a couple of regionals. So like when you talk about the Midwest, I think you're right. Like Riptide, there's a lot of killers here who you don't see at other stuff in terms of, you're not going to see them at like maybe Genesis or something like that. But with Gommel kind of getting bigger, with the Big House obviously staying the staple it is, we do get to see some Midwest representation. But a lot of this is like they are filling in the gaps between all of their regionals, because I think it's a scene that is like very, very strong in the region and within its own region. So that being said, we're coming up to Riptide. We've got the chance for all these players who've gone off at regionals, at locals, at whatever. This is their chance to prove themselves. So CL, I'm asking you. You are a person who's been all around the Midwest. What are some of your like ideal candidates when we talk about who is going to go into a major like Riptide and come out kind of having shown their stuff with like a different, like basically having shown all the growth that they had at locals and regionals? Who are some of the candidates that you think of?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's one really obvious one. We did talk about it during the pre-show, so I'm gonna just go ahead and get out of the way. It is possibly one of the biggest hidden bosses right now, and it is Hossify from Michigan, a former Falco, now Marth player who, in his own region, I believe is 2 or even 3-0 on Ginger this year at locals. Has also taken multiple, or has at least won 1 set against KJH. And he is looking in line to be possibly number 1 in the state right now.
Yeah.
We also watched him win the most recent bodied fairly dominantly. Ober still had a great losers run there, but it wasn't enough to stop Ossify from. I think he only lost 1 game in the entire tournament, and it was in grand finals to Ober. So Ossify obviously stands out there just because I think the only other major he's attended this year was Get On My Level, if I'm not mistaken. And I think at that tournament, it was one of those sort of classic events where you just place your seed. You don't really get any crazy good wins. You don't take any bad losses by any means, but you're still out there, and you did something at least.
Yeah, Ossify kind of one of those players that embodies this idea of like why regionals matter so much for certain players.
Mhm.
I mean, even just like his local performances you talk about. Yeah, I think he has more than one KGH win. I don't know if it's the season or the year or whatever. I've definitely seen him beat him more than once. Like, yeah, like you just look at a player and through locals, and it's one of those great things about Smash that sometimes you don't get, which is like you watch a player get better and better and better, and then you're just like, oh baby, I can't wait till they get to show this off. And like Ossify is a perfect example of that. Yeah. You mentioned Gommel. I feel like he got like 33rd or something, kind of one of those modest things where he
Yeah.
just like loses to a couple good players. Yeah, he lost to Spark and Khalid, beat Zaza, formerly Midnight Blue, and ooh, here's a tough one. MGMG. How do you pronounce that?
I think it's just the initials,
Okay.
MGMG.
But
That's at least how I'd say it.
yeah, he's got wins on those players, which is just kind of like a tournament that doesn't really tell you anything. But he's also got he's got the Cermeris win that he got at God, I think it was Shield Drop. So it's like obviously he has the ability to prove himself with smaller things. So I think he's a great pick in terms of someone who could really take Riptide as his opportunity to show stuff off. What do you think, Edwin? When you think of the Midwest, you're not as traveled as Seal, but like I know that you still the Midwest is a very interesting region that you still obviously have a lot of thoughts on. Like, who are some players that you think about that could have breakouts at large, or like specifically Riptide?
Yeah, obviously I'm very biased when I bring up this player, but I am especially excited to see how Flash does at his second major. I mean, this is someone who the legend of Flash started
Kind of
during
his third, if you ask me.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess
I don't know.
that's
I
true.
guess you're not as much of a real
Can't
Flash
forget
fan
Bummy.
as I am.
Okay. All right. The point is we're talking about someone whose breakout out or his come up basically happened behind closed doors during the pandemic. I mean, Flash back then, Professor Flash, was someone who was just a power ranked player in region that suddenly started posterizing like top 25 players and in secret net play sessions. Then came to Riptide and had his big 9th place breakout where he beat Ginger and only lost to Wizzy twice. He like destroyed Pleba and pools as the underdog of Pleba's pool, which I think is really funny. And then I mean this year he's done great. We're talking about someone that beat Salt, beat B-Bats, beat KJH multiple times, I think.
Lowercase hero.
Yeah, lowercase hero. I said Salt beat Junebug recently at SmashCon.
True.
I mean, Flash. If we're talking about someone that, and now this is a stat show, but if we're talking about that someone that passes the top 50 vibe check, it's got to be him, right? I think Flash could potentially have a really big run at this tournament, and I'm not just saying that because we're his sponsor. I truly believe in him.
Yeah, no, Flash. We first talked about him on the Riptide episode. Actually, like, I think we talked about him before the Riptide episode as someone who could break out. But I was definitely not expecting the breakout he had back at his Riptide. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things with Flash is that like you see all these players who get good through either their smaller region or through what is becoming increasingly popular, which is you see players who get very good versus through net play, and there's always this curve, right? This like the growing pains when they actually come to a major, and I just never saw that with Flash, right? I didn't see it at Riptide when he in 2021 when he went. I didn't see it at Bemi. Didn't see it at SmashCon. Like, I remember talking about SmashCon as a hashtag ad, I guess, because we are a sponsor. I was talking to him and I was like, hey man, whatever number is next to your name at the end of this, don't worry. You succeeded by just coming to the tournament, right? Like, we've had so many people who come and they just like want to show off everything, right? Especially from mainly stats players. We try to get people from regions that they don't get to travel much, and they are just like mounting pressure on themselves. And I think that every player that we have has done great. But like, I just wanted to be clear. I was like, hey, Flash, you haven't gone to a tournament forever. Like, you haven't gone to a major in forever. This is that was his first like out of region major. Bemi obviously out of region, but different experience. And like nothing I said mattered because he just kind of was cool as a cucumber the entire time. Like he obviously had that really close loss to the Swooper, But like other than that, he looked great in like every set he played, and he still looked great in that set. It's just sometimes you get swooped on. So like no, Flash is an amazing pick here. Preeminent also has like a pretty good bracket here. I think Preeminent definitely has a chance to make a little bit of a run. Definitely make it to round 2 pools and winners, which that sounds like that should be a more of an accomplishment than it is. But this kind of like kind of like we talked about last week with Shine, or 2 weeks ago with Shine, round 1 pools is not a cakewalk. So I think Preeminent, Preeminent like has I think Free Palestine, which seems like a really
that's pretty tough.
It's a tough one, but honestly, Preeminent has like made his mark through kind of just like trudging through all these like it's got like Sheik wins, got Marth wins, obviously Free Palestine. I don't think he'll go Fox, but he has a Fox. Like Preeminent's just like been making his grade this year by going to all these Midwest regionals and playing all these matchups. So I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, see, I don't know if there's anyone else you have in mind in terms of.
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, let's not go crazy.
Yeah, I won't go too crazy. There's a couple Ohio players specifically though that I want to talk about. I feel like we haven't got to see enough of them this year, at least enough for me. I think I know where you're going with one of them. Yeah, the first one should be fairly obvious, of course. It is Lord Dreff. Dreffin himself. He's definitely put Melee a bit on the back burner this year. Believe he's had a child, so of course life comes first, and Melee will always be here for Dreffin, as has been shown throughout his illustrious 18, 19-year career at this point. He's been around forever. But yeah, it'll be great to get to watch Dreffin. He is, I have it right here. Let me double check. He is going to be playing Just Joe. And then if he wins that, he's actually going to be facing Moki. Moki, obviously, a pretty tough draw.
Honestly, I think both of those are pretty tough.
Yeah, Just Joe also kind of tough, but I hear he's playing Laserless Falco, and Dreffin's really good against Falco, if you ask me. So might not be quite as scary as an initial bracket read would sound. But some other Ohio players too. The Real Thing, another person I feel like we haven't got to see enough of. We did get to see him at Bemi and Shield Drop, but I can't remember any other tournaments.
I think he was at SmashCon. It was just one of those. I think he might have been part of the Asashi losers run. Is the issue?
Ooh,
one of the many souls taken down in that run.
You just get caught in there sometimes, yeah. And one other Ohio player, too, that I am interested to watch here is Holiday. Holiday was one of those players who I feel like was sort of starting to break out in 2019. He was a Fox main at that time. I remember him taking some good wins back then. And then he sort of disappeared during the net play era.
There was a puff at one point. Let's not gloss over that.
That's true. But yeah, in 2020 and 2021, we didn't see too much of him. And then he reemerged in 2022 as a Sheik main. I think a lot of people may actually not even know that he plays Sheik now. But Holiday, he's been on the grind. I'm in a Sheik Discord that he's in, and he is quite active in there, always posting clips that he uses his phone to record his computer screen. No, but he's always posting situations of being like, was this the right thing to do here? What could I have done better? So I'm really looking forward to see what he does. He does have Grab, who I'll tell you firsthand is pretty tough, even as a Marth player, which obviously most Sheiks will enjoy encountering. But there's a possibility there. So we'll have to see if Holiday can show off his new main and make a big run here in his hometown major.
Holiday, kind of an interesting corollary to Ossify, as two players who were really, really good. Ossify was, I think, seeded top 16 or top 20 at one of the National Mailer Arcadians, for those who don't know. He has been very good for a very long time, and then kind of disappeared through online, came back as a different main. I think, Holiday, definitely someone who looks like Holiday could have made top 100 if 2020 continued, and kind of fell off through that online era and came back. Yeah, I think Holiday's an amazing pick. I think Ossify is an amazing pick. Honestly, Seal, got a lot of amazing picks in you. Thank
you. That's if I didn't, I would be a bit embarrassed, honestly. You gotta Gotta know the Midwest.
Like a
people.
great afro. You have amazing picks in you. Edwin, what do you have any more thoughts on the Midwest here before we kind of go to the tournament at large?
Yeah, I think this person counts as Midwest. I would hope so.
Oh
But
God,
I
we're
think
having Midwest discussion.
no, I think Sir
Midwest
Maris
discourse.
it could have a third straight really strong performance here. You know, the funny thing with Sir Maris is I feel like he's been pretty good for a while. Last year, obviously, got ranked top 100. I looked at his resume like for the year, and especially since August, and I think it's pretty funny because like Ben is the really big win on his resume right now for the year. But like if you look at Sir Maris's wins and losses, it's kind of like it's very interesting because it's filled to the brim with a bunch of names that you can expect to see in the bottom half of top 100 or pretty safe ballot names. So like just giving it the a brief like just like glazing over his sets for a second. He's got a lot of wins. He's got wins on like Essie. He's got hold on, I had it written down right here. He had wins on like Essie. He had beat Quang, he beat Jai Raiden, he beat Null. Obviously, I mentioned the Ben win before. So yeah, he's got some stuff this year. Like a lot of it is either like names that are just kind of like below the like the top 50 right now, but sort of in that contention or could break it with a really big breakout performance. So he's got a ton of like these really small wins that are pretty impressive. And obviously, he just got a top 35 win at Shine. So I'm interested to see how Samaris does here, whether he's going to just grab like three or four, like 2 or 3 more names to add to his resume of people that he's beaten. If he's just going to like beat the entire 51 to 100 range, or if he's going to take home another like, really big name. So I think he's definitely someone to look out for here.
You've been talking a lot about Samaris recently. You had a long spiel about him last episode. You got this episode. I better not hear you say anything about him next episode.
He's cracked.
He's cracked. I agree. We don't have to talk about it every single week. No, Sir Maris actually recently moved to Ohio. So if you look at the cruise, you might see. You know that might be a question. Why is Sir Maris on the Ohio cruise?
Ohio's crew is so stacked, dude. Oh my
it's
god,
ridiculous.
Yeah,
They're too strong.
Well, Seal, you are someone who pledges your allegiance to a couple different
that's true.
states in the Midwest. We've got the crew battle. We've got honestly, this is probably like the biggest Midwestern crew we've seen maybe ever. I don't know. We probably have to go back a real long time to see something like this. Like obviously there's some players who are missing. No, I don't really know if any of these states necessarily are at like full strength. Even Ohio, which like basically is like has all their best players, I think could be, you know, supposedly better. Like if Zealot is actually a player, and not just a figment of our imagination. But like, yeah, this is like one of the, it's probably like one of the most real Midwest battles that we've seen maybe ever.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of players who are going into this. There's a lot of Midwest representation. So I do have to ask, who do you think is going to end up winning this crew battle?
Yeah. Well, as much as I would like to choose one of the 3 states in the Midwest that I've lived in, I'm probably going to have to say that Ohio is going to take it. Their crew is just really strong. Like everyone is just capable of like making top 100, if not like well into the top 100 if they're hitting their peak results here. And I think that if it's not Ohio and Michigan in the finals, then something crazy happened.
Yeah. So for reference here, unless anything has changed, but I believe that the crews are Dreffin, Free Palestine, Sir Maris, which is, you know, after moving to Ohio, that's why he's on there. Flash and Essie with Balloon Day and the real thing as an alternative, which that's insane.
Real thing as an alternative.
You tell
like,
me the real thing's your
strong.
alternative? I heard
That's
that before I
crazy.
heard the crew. I heard that the real thing was an alternative, and I was like, oh, something's messed up here. Someone, you know, they did a mistake. And then I heard the crew, and I went, that might actually just be right.
Yeah.
Like that might be the correct take.
What is Illinois' crew?
Illinois crew is kind of
missing a few
interesting.
people.
Yeah, there's no Scherzo, there's no Mech, and
There's another guy who's missing from. There's another like when you mentioned Mech, and it reminded me of there's another player who's missing from the Illinois crew, like another like mid tier kind of maybe
Yeah,
again in play, maybe again in
yeah, I know
player.
who you're talking about. God, what's his name? Do you know Seal?
D's. I think it's don't go D's.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, I
But
think
yeah,
it's DZ because D's would be the SoCal Chic player.
I thought they're pronounced the same.
Oh, I say DZ at least. I say the
Hmm.
initials, but it is lower or
That's
is
confusing with
capital
Matt
D
Deasy then.
lowercase d. That's true, but it's like
Another
capital
mid-tier
D
player.
lowercase z, so I could see that being read as D's rather than DZ. Um,
Regardless, Illinois Cruz, Zamu,
yeah,
Ober, Peanut Phobia, Michael, and Q.
yeah,
Which like that's a lot of strong players. I think like the only thing is that like you are talking about crews that like are literally filled with possible top 100 players. Like Ohio, I would probably put money that at least 4 out of these 5 make top 100.
yeah, easily,
And you could actually probably make a pretty decent bet that all 5 would make the top 100. And you look at
and
Michigan
the real thing too.
and the real thing, right? Like they, maybe
Hell, even
6 of those
Balloon Day
people.
can get on there. But we could do it.
Crazy things have happened. But like Michigan is Ginger, KJ, Ossify, who we've obviously mentioned,
Yeah.
J Cubes, Braz Monkey. No Quang, no Morse code, or even
Mhm.
someone like Kiyoshi, who we don't really see much of, like could be a real boon to that. But like we
Yeah,
are seeing a little bit of a
drop off.
Michigan that is there's a little bit of a drop off there. Michigan that's maybe not at full power. So like I don't know. That's if there's one thing about this that like really makes me think it's Ohio is Michigan not being at full strength, Illinois not being at full strength.
Hmm.
Obviously, Indiana missing blue is a real and like
Yeah,
like the Imders of the world is a real tough thing. But overall, I think this tournament or the little mini tournament, the crew battle is it's gonna be so interesting. So who are you rooting
yeah,
for? You've lived in a lot of these states. You've
right.
broke bread with a lot of these players.
Yeah, I would probably have to say if I'm rooting for one crew, I think I might have to go. Oh, this is hard. There's so
Ooh,
many pros here.
some heartbreak is gonna come after you
Ooh,
answer this.
yeah. Um, I probably gotta go with Wisconsin. I think all the people in the Wisconsin crew I've just been friends with like for the longest compared to the other crews. So while I have great affection towards like I would say pretty much everyone on all of the crews. I'm pretty sure I'm like at least I know them all pretty well, but
Wow.
um, the Wisconsin people like we'd probably just go back the furthest. So um, I'll have to go with them. But I will say, in the last section we were talking about players. If I had some more time, I definitely would have also wanted to mention Shabo, Q, and Ober as all
Mm.
players that just barely missed top 100. And it'll be very interesting to see if they can punch that ticket this year with a good major here and maybe Big House too. So Chicago probably would be my second pick as that's my home. I would say my true home region is Chicago.
Well, we gave you a Sophie's choice, and you did it. I will say you made the choice pretty easily. So I appreciate that. Appreciate you made it. You did a lot easier than Sophie did when. But I guess there are
But she made that
circumstances where
choice.
the circumstances were a little different. I guess we could all we could all agree. Um, Edwin, there's a lot of players here outside of the Midwest. Obviously, this is it's missing a couple top players, but this is still a major. This is a major that I think not as much as Shine did when we last talked about a major. But there's a lot of implications here on kind of the larger sphere of melee, right? We talked about a lot of players in the Midwest who can make top 100 based off of this, but there's a lot of people who can go up and down within the rankings, within the even the kind of the top echelon of rankings here. So when we talk about players here, who do you think has the most to prove?
Yeah, so we actually, I think we discussed this in person actually at Shine with Zamu, where Zamu talked about
Oh,
what
name
what it
drop.
was like being a top 25 player, top 20 player, or whatever, and he mentioned that he was ranked above a certain player, and he said, "Yeah, I'm better than him." Well, I don't actually think I'm better than him, but my results are better than him right now. And he was talking about Ginger. I'm really excited to see Ginger at this event. I think Ginger, pound for pound, like when it comes to his performances at regionals and majors, from what little we've seen of Ginger this year, has actually been pretty strong. This is someone who has gradually risen about through as long of a time span playing the game as you'll find. Literally playing since the game came out. Like was kind of a regional mid-level player. As relatively recently as 2015. It just had this very slow but gradual and persistent rise to eventually entering the contention for top 15 or whatever during the pandemic, right? And Ginger, again, when you think of active grinders, when you think of players who go to every tournament, who play a ton of Melee, Ginger is near the top of that list. And I think what's been interesting about this year, or what's been unusual about this year, is that hasn't really been the case for Ginger. Ginger actually took a step back from social media entirely, stopped streaming for a while, didn't really go to as many really big events as we were used to seeing from him before. He said that he was taking a break from the community because he wanted to deal with his personal health. But I think the interesting thing about him amid all of that is that if you just look at each of his tournament results on his own, they're quite good. And I don't mean just quite good for Ginger standards. I mean like unusually good for him. Earlier in the year, everybody used to talk about Ginger having a Falcon problem. He beat SJ at Genesis. Everyone used to talk about how Ginger couldn't beat any of the Barths. He beat Kadoran at Wisdom Melee.
Oh, yeah.
So
that was really
there's
impressive.
a lot of steps that we've seen there's a lot of progress that we've seen kind of through what's the opposite of dense? Through a large spread of tournaments that kind of have a lot of time in between them. So I think it's potentially hidden what's otherwise been a pretty big step forward for him this year, even if it's not one that necessarily coincided with him having a rank that corresponds to what we think of his skill and what we think of his potential. I think it's there, and I'm really curious to see how Ginger does after his long break from the game, because I think he's quite good. I think he's really good at the game, and I think he's a scary out for any opponent. I really mean that.
Yeah, I have two things I'll say about Ginger at this tournament. First is he does have Plop in his path, which I'm really interested to watch since at Genesis 8, Ginger actually defeated Plop for the first time, 3-2, after frankly having a really tough time with Plop for a long time. Like I watched a lot of those online. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's Plop after all. But frankly, I was really surprised when he managed to beat him. I thought it was very impressive. It's a great showing. And I'll be really interested to see if he can do it again, or if Plop, who apparently is feeling great about his controller, is sleeping well. It sounds like we're going to get full power Plop, so it will definitely be a set to watch out. And the second thing is that I played Ginger this year at Out of the Blue in April, and I nearly got 8-stocked. It was absolutely absurd. He like randomly played a 10 out of 10 against me, or maybe 9 out of 10 or whatever you'd want to call it. He brought it up in the winner's interview. He's like, yeah, I played Seal and I just played like insane and I just destroyed him. And I was like, you know what? It's true. I literally almost got 8-stocked. And I was like, I hadn't been 8-stocked since I played Leffen at Smash and Splash 4 like 5 years ago. So thankfully it didn't happen. But if he plays that well, like I would not be surprised to see him win the tournament. I don't care. He was so good.
Yeah, you mentioned Plup. There's like a couple different levels of players here who I think have a lot to prove. Riptide is really interesting because I think the implications for number one are probably pretty safe, right? Obviously, if Zane loses, that does hurt his case. But like being a tournament that does not have like Cody, doesn't have kind of a lot of players who might make that path towards number one. You might not think that this tournament has a lot of implications, but honestly, like there's a lot of really interesting things here. You mentioned Plup and Wizzy, I think, are in their own tier of like, if you talk about someone who has a lot to prove, I don't know if Plup and Wizzy come to mind because they've proven so much, but like, we could very possibly see a path for Wizzy here to establish that not only is he a top 10 player, but he might even be higher than that, right? Like we saw him at CEO. We saw him at Invincible, other than that one game versus card. But other than that, we haven't really.
I hope people go watch that. No, I'm going to talk about it.
We don't talk about the one game versus card.
Watch Wizrobe versus Card at Invincible 7, specifically Game 2.
At least watch the other games where he wins to do him that favor. But
Fair
like
enough.
we've seen him do very, very well. And I think one of the big questions is, well, how much are we going to see of him? Right? There's not a ton of tournaments left before the end of the year. Are we going to see him at something like the Big House? Are we going to see him maybe at majors that kind of get bigger, like Santa Paws, maybe even DreamHack Atlanta, maybe Rise and Grind? I don't know, but like the landscape for Melee after this is not as kind of big as what came before it. So it's like this thing of like, well, if Wizzy has a good performance here, this literally could seal the year for him, and Plup as well. And honestly, I'm call me crazy for this. Edwin and I were talking in good old Boston, and I hit him with I think Wizzy has like the third best chance to win a major. Like if you talk about people's paths, I think Wizzy's path is very, very good. Because if you talk about, like, I think Zane's number one, right? There's a lot of people who he's kind of like 50-50 against, but he generally just wins those 50-50s at this point. And like, there's no one who he's like really, really, really scared of. I think Cody's the person who he really doesn't want to run to is Zane, which is pretty good for him. Obviously Cody can still like lose to a lot of people, but in terms of like bracket demons, he doesn't really have any. So when you get to all the other people, I think you start to see these players with more and more bracket demons. You look at Wizzy, Mango's going to be difficult forever. Plup's going to be difficult forever. But if you're talking about people that are going to be really hard for you, I don't know if you could pick a better two than Mango and Plup. Plup, a guy who doesn't go to stuff. Mango guy who doesn't really go to stuff, and when he does, he might go Doc, right? Like the only better person for Wizzy would be Wizzy, but that doesn't really work. So like Wizzy, I just like, maybe it's too soon to say, but the idea of him versus like J-Mook or Leffen, obviously versus H-Box, he's proven himself. Like he just really seems to me like he can turn a lot of these matchups into winning matchups for him. A lot of the players have like beat him recently, I think maybe in their last sets with him. So there's maybe like a little bit of a proving ground for him, but like I don't know. Wizzy could really come into this tournament as a guy who we all think of as really good and end with a tournament, or like end as a guy who we all know is top 10, which is insane to say. I literally think that 10 people can win a major this year, and you have to mention Wizzy as one of them. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does, what Plup does. Even players who are like lower down, like None or something, like players who still have a lot to prove with their year. But yeah, no, I'm super excited to see, because for a tournament that is not as stacked as what we've seen recently, a tournament that doesn't have the same entrance size as we've seen recently, this is a tournament where I feel like the storylines are still super strong, still palpable when you look at it. Edwin, what do you think? You called me crazy when I said that. You said I was smoking weed. And then you mentioned it was legal in the state of Massachusetts. No, that didn't happen. But like, yeah, what do you think on this, Ed? When you've got some time to sit on this idea of Wizzy's like tournament performance and what he could do, what do you think?
I like his top level matchup spreads. I agree with you that I think Plup and Mango are two very fortunate kryptonites to have within the top echelon. But I want to see how, because look, we've seen this before with Wizzy, right? Where I think in the past, if Wizzy hadn't been at a tournament for a while, he would go to an event. He would play a top 25 player, like a top 25 Fox player or something. We think it was initially very scary for Wizzy coming in because he had taken such a long break, and then he just 3-0s them. Like he gets 4 grabs in a game. He converts all of them to touch of death's the Fox player every time, and it's kind of one of those things where like, even if you're in that skill level right beneath the top echelon, Wizzy is kind of like what's it called? If you're not tall enough to ride this ride, like you can't get on, right? I'm struggling to find the words for it, but I think what we used to see with Wizzy a lot in the past is these kind of reality checks being given to the rapidly improving field. So I'm curious if that is going to apply in this situation also, and if this is one of those things, kind of like I'm gonna use kind of a bit of a unfavorable analogy here, but it's just an analogy, a very loose one. But it's kind of like when Chudat comes back after a while, and we just assume something like, oh, there's no way that Chudat can do well, and either he reality comes after him like it did at SmashCon and he gets like 97th or whatever, or he beats Aklo, right? Like something crazy like that. So I think with Wizrobe, we've never really seen reality bend the way of the rising star finally catching up to him. It's kind of always been one of those things where, like, you're probably not going to beat him in your first time around, even if you're in that very,
unless you're RK.
Yeah, unless you're RK and you figure out his weakness and reaction techniques that he can't dash back on a crouch or whatever. But or L, I guess. But yeah, so I'm interested to see it. I need to see how he does against that field again for a third tournament. So CEO was obviously amazing. Invincible was great, except for that game against Card.
Why did you bring that up?
Yeah, but I want to see how he does
against Card.
I want to see how he does against the Magi's of the world now, how he does against the Zuppies of the world, how he does against the Joshmans, because I think he has it to contend against each of the top 9 or top 10. I'm not going to say he's favored against all of them, but I think he has what it takes to, if not take a set, turn those head-to-heads into something that's a bit more even with most of them. But I want to see if he can consistently get there in the first place, and if he consistently gets there, if he can start turning those head-to-heads around. I think it's a little too early to give him the third highest chances. I mean, we're talking about a field of Zayn and Cody. There's Moki, the guy who might have the most to prove here by winning his first major.
Yeah.
And yet, I say he's got the third best chances. No one's proven me wrong.
The numbers.
Seal, you talk about Moki. We've kind of not mentioned Moki.
Yeah.
The last time we saw him, he was not in the best shape, right? Shine, he ended up losing to Zamu and then dropped out. Like, I think that is something that we can just not think about when we think about Moki, right? Yeah. The rest of his year has been so insanely good and so insanely consistent for a player that we really did not view as consistent until, like, a year ago, basically. So I want to hear your thoughts on Moki here, because I think if you talk about people who have something to prove, there's one more thing that Moki needs to prove. Moki basically has proven everything except for one thing, and I want to hear from you on this one. So what do you think about Moki at Riptide? What does he have to prove?
Yeah, of course. So as we all know, that one thing is winning a major. It's something that Moki has not done yet. We all know he's capable of it with the right bracket. Obviously, it's been kind of difficult for him because he's had 3 demons essentially, whereas most of the people who are struggling to try and get their chance to win a major might only have like 1 or 2. And those 3 demons are, well, 2 of the most active players, Zayn and Jmook, and then also Mango. I mean, he finally almost got one against Mango at losers finals of Get On My Level, but something just didn't quite work out for him. But with that said, Riptide really, really looks like a good shot for him. I mean, just walking through his bracket here, he starts out with Dreffen, as we discussed. Dreffen, a Sheik player, not one that we'd necessarily favor against like these super high-paced, fast Fox players that are going to run him down and give him trouble. Especially not like these, like the... I don't know. People would always talk about Dreffen versus like the young up-and-comer Fox as being kind of a tough one, but you never know. Maybe Dreffen can get it done. But if he does pass that test, he has Spark right after. Spark definitely someone who's like much stronger against Fox, I would say, and also a stronger player, just admittedly. With that said, though, I watched those 2 play at Apex 2022, and frankly, all respect to Moki, I absolutely love that guy. He's very cool. That said, did break my heart because Spark came back on so hard. It was like he was up 2-0 and then like up like 3 stocks to 1, and then like got clutched on, and then just kind of, if I remember correctly, he got like kind of destroyed after that, and I was like, what happened? With that said, though, it's definitely a good look for Moki. Spark kind of been struggling versus Fox lately, as he will tell you himself. Has lost to Panda, who, of course, is incredible against Sheik, as we know, twice in the last like 2 months. And I've heard he's considering using a different character or even a different controller. against Fox, but we'll have to wait and see. I don't quite think this is soon enough that we're going to see that at Riptide. With that said, if Moki does defeat his next Sheik in a row, he will be playing Kadoran, who, of course, is definitely no pushover for a Fox, but we saw Moki beat him pretty confidently just about a month and a half ago, get on my level. He did like 10 BM shines in a row. Um, so he's definitely confident in that one. And but again, can't sleep on Kadoran, but that's still a decent draw for Moki. And after that, which again he's seeded to win, he has Amsa in winter semis. And I don't even think I need to say that much about that. Moki's been one of Amsa's demons for this entire year. I think him and Cody are like a combined 11-0 on Amsa or something like that, or maybe even higher than that. So that leaves Moki in winners finals. And his seeded opponent for winners finals is, of course, Zane, the 1 seed, who he has never before beaten. But Moki has brought him close before. We've seen game 5s, we've seen reverse 3-0s. And if there's any time to do it, you're in winners finals, you're feeling great. Or he may even find himself facing Plup. Plup's the 4th seed of the tournament, and he's someone we definitely know can beat Zane. So if he's facing Plup, who he 3-0'd earlier this year at Genesis, he may just find himself in winner's side of grand finals. And from there, just 3 games until you finally made history. So if Moki's going to do it, this is a great chance for him. Obviously, he'll have plenty more chances, but it would be really incredible to see him make the run this weekend at Riptide.
Edwin, what do you think? We've talked about the mythical Moki run to getting first in a major for a little bit now. What do you think about his run here at Riptide? So elegantly said by Seal.
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing here is, one, I don't think Moki Zane is a foregone conclusion. I think it's very hard for him. I'm not gonna lie about that, but I think it's one of those potentially breakable obstacles. I mean, the same way that we saw Cody struggle against Zane for so long before finally breaking through. What you need is, you just need that one set, right? That one set, and then it becomes suddenly possible. You get over this big mental block. So I think Moki's kind of in that similar spot to where Cody was before he won Summit 12, and he's taken Zane very close before. I don't think it's hopeless. Now, with that said, like Seal talked about, if we're talking about a potential field in which Zane may not even be in the picture, it would be one in which you have people like Plup, Amsa, and Wizzy there to potentially take care of him at any point in bracket. So I think that's something that's potentially interesting. I think Laud is not a walk in the park for Zane either. So we could see Laud potentially take care of Zane before Moki has to run into him. So, and obviously that's, I'm not going to say that that's the expected outcome, but I'm just saying if you're going to craft a tournament in which both Zane and Moki happen to be there, we're talking about a bunch of players who can beat Zane or have shown that they're not walks in the park for him. And many of those same players are ones that we would solidly favor Moki over as well, or see as a little bit more reliable against, Amsa being a pretty good example of that. Now, again, I'm not saying that Amsa is favored over Zane, or that we should expect Amsa to defeat Zane. I'm just saying that when it comes to matchups against each other in the top echelon and across the field, I think the matchups inherent within the Riptide field are ones that are very good for Moki, and I think a lot of those matchups make things tricky for Zane simultaneously. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a non-zero shot at happening, and I think it's a pretty good one. But I don't think he's going to win Riptide. I think Zane's going to win Riptide.
Okay, well,
I got
jump the gun just yet. One thing I want to say about Moki is that I don't even think that this is his best bracket that you could possibly craft, right? Sometimes when we talk about which players can win a major, it requires a hand-picked bracket, and it requires a lot of luck, right?
Kadoran and Spark, I guess, is pretty tricky now that you mention it.
It's really funny because, obviously Amsa is a really good draw for Moki, as he's proven time and time again this year. But you look at his matches before even getting there, and it does not seem like it's the best possible thing for him. Obviously Zane being in his path, which just might be an inevitability to anyone who wants to win a major in 2023, is not is not great. Like he has a set win on Plup recently, but even the idea that he might play Wizrobe instead of Amsa is kind of a scary one. Like, right? It's this value that we don't know. And for all we know, Moki could just like 3-0 him. But he's like, yeah, Wizzy's really good, and it is kind of scary to think that that might be a matchup that he has to play. And even after all of that, I still think he's got a good chance to win. Like, I saw people say this is one of his best brackets, and I think that it is somewhat best bracket that he's like had. But if you're talking about players who haven't won a major, you kind of have to go out of your way to give them all their best matchups. And the fact that like, HBox is not in his path, which is a matchup that he's done well in, or like Cody, a player who he's beat recently. Like the fact that he could have a actual path that does not include those people really just sings Moki's praises as someone who could very possibly win. Now, that being said, man of the hour is Big Z Dog, right? Like, I feel like if we are talking about who can win a major, it's about how well they can do against Zayn. And if we're talking about like who is going to win and we don't mention Zayn, it's because we are specifically not mentioning Zayn, right? Like, yeah, like it kind of used to be that way with Armada and with HBox, and like there are players who were so good that they end up being like heliocentric, where if you didn't say they were going to win, it's because you had a take. And it's interesting, right? We're seeing Zayn approach that. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that I don't think, like, when you look at Zayn's matchup spread, there's not one that he doesn't really necessarily want to see. Obviously, like J-Mook and Leffen are matchups that probably are some of the worst matchups that he has. But even those are, could be 50-50, could maybe be 40-60 out, not in his favor, maybe even 60-40 in his favor at times. Like he kind of oscillates between a lot of these 50-50 matchups that go in and out. Kind of like Amsa as a player that we saw, obviously the Sheik players. And it's just like when he gets all the coin flips, he looks unstoppable. And when he doesn't get the coin flips, it looked like he did earlier in the year, where he was like losing to Cody, losing to Amsa, losing to like some of these players. So as we see right now, he is kind of hitting it. He's kind of hitting all the coin flips. Even with the Cody loss, he was still playing amazing. He just happened to run into a Cody who was playing even more amazing. So it is really tough to look at anything that happens here and not think that Zayn is going to win. But I'm not sure if I'm completely bought on the idea yet. Give me a second. While I'm waiting, Edwin, you said Zayn's going to win, right? You want to go more into depth about why you think that?
Yeah, but I have a very shallow reason for it. I'm starving of a major prediction. This year has not been good for me. I've cursed out of the 9 or 8 majors or whatever that I previewed. I put a lot of time into my previews thinking about who can beat who and how the matchups align in the field.
You're looking for an easy win, aren't you?
And I just need Zayn to tap it in. I just need that one, because the only prediction I've gotten right all year, I didn't even make in the column. I made on the show, and when I said that Cody would win major upset, and that's like. That's not worth bragging about. I mean, I guess
honestly, if you said it on the show, probably no one saw
it. Yeah. So I really need the Monday morning Marth curse to end. So I'm taking the easy way out and picking the guy that is definitely the favorite.
I mentioned how Zayn is heliocentric and the fact that everyone kind of has to go through him. I forgot that we have an even more heliocentric player in the scene. However, everything has to be about you. Somehow Zayn winning is an Edwin dub? You're insane, man. Anyway, I like that you took the easy way out. Hey, I'm a natural born quitter. I'm lazy. I take the easy way out. Glad to see that you're finally joining us.
I've taken so many Ed losses this year. When I predicted Zayn to win Shine, the amount of comments I saw in the Monday Morning Marth channel and the Discord saying, okay, now we know Zayn's not going to win because Edwin's cursed him.
Dude, the thing about predicting Zayn is that it felt so right? He was on a hot streak. It wouldn't even be cool if you were right, and yet you were not right. Man,
you won like, what, 3 in a row?
Yeah, right? Because it would have been Fate, Gommel, and then SmashCon, yeah. Well, Zayn, I think, is a hard person to pass up, whether or not the reasons are selfish or if they're more analytical. So I do think he's a really good pick. Seal, what do you think? You mentioned how you have a pick for who you think's going to win this.
Yeah, this is definitely somewhat of a heart pick, and that
I
should
think I know
be
what it
pretty
is.
clear where I'm going with this. But
Lowercase hero.
It's Jake Ham.
yes, Henry, it's Henry's turn. He's due for a major win. We've all known
You're
it.
gonna celebrate with one
Um,
Red's Apple Ale, as is Kalahari tradition.
See, what about
Sorry,
Jake
sorry.
Ham?
yes,
You need a chic dub, so why not go with him?
yeah. No, I'm definitely looking forward to watching Jake Ham. But on the topic of a chic dub, I will be rooting for the man who I was heartbroken by last year in grand finals. That is, of course, Plup. I think this is going to be Plup's chance. He just tweeted earlier today. I'll read it out exactly here. My controller feels pretty good, and I've been sleeping well. If I lose at Riptide, then I got outplayed. Smiley face. So that is to say, if Plup is playing well, if he's able to edge guard Fox McCloud, which was really well, the only thing that stopped him a major upset. I'll tell you that. There was just the edge guards. He went like 2-20 against Sunsei and IBDW and still beat Sunsei. So if he's able to edge guard Fox McCloud, if he gets past Aklo, he may find himself in winter semis against possibly Amsa or no, he'd be fighting Zane in winter semis, which, as I mentioned, is definitely doable. And then depending how like Moki versus Kadoran goes, if Kadoran wins that, then Amsa and Wizzy, I would say, are both favored versus Wanko. And then you may just find one of Plup's two best opponents in winners finals. If Plup finds himself fighting Wizrobe or Amsa in winners finals after defeating Zane, then I don't know. Like I would be surprised to see if anyone could stop him. Maybe Moki rolls through on a loser's run. Who knows? But hell, even Moki himself, Plop can definitely win that. Like that's just because he got 3-0 to Genesis doesn't mean it's unwinnable. Just because he's actually never beaten Moki before. I believe they're 0-3 or 0-2 or something. Though I think at least one of those was all Fox, so don't put too much stock into that one. But yeah, that all is to say, Moki definitely looks like Plup's hardest opponent. Zane, I believe, has won the last few against Plup, but those two are always a coin flip. Even if it feels like it's been turning up heads like the last couple times for Zane, you just never know. And he will have to fight Aklo, who is fresh off a Jmook win. And if a Fox is beating Jmook, then it's looking pretty tough for any Sheiks in their bracket. I'll tell you that. Because Jmook's definitely a level above. But again, if Plup is playing well, if he's well rested, if his controller's feeling well, and if he's able to edgeguard Fox McCloud, then I will be there cheering him on in the audience, and he will win Riptide 2023.
I hope his controller's feeling well. Plup, I think you're right. Plup is definitely a person who, I mentioned how Zane has all these matchups where like it really doesn't seem like there's anything that he does really want to not run into, because even his worst matchups seem pretty doable for him. Plup oddly kind of feels the way too. It's just that like he's not enough. He's not around enough.
I never trust the numbers with Plup.
No.
Yeah.
No, I was talking to you, Pengu, way back. This is before Summit 13. And Ipengu's like, Zane figured Plup out. Zane's never going to lose. Because Zane was on like a 4-0 win streak. And I was like, that means nothing with Plup. Plup, the numbers mean nothing. Plup will be 0-4 against someone and destroy him the next time he played. Plup did beat Zane there at Summit 13. And like, yeah, the number really never means anything with Plup. So it's really hard to tell. The one number that probably means something is his record versus Wizrobe. It's probably not going to. And Amsa, true. Both players are here.
Hear me out on this. I do not think 25-2 is replicable on land.
That's not what I was thinking about. I'm just thinking in general. We haven't seen Plup lose to Amsa since like what, like a Summit in like 2018? I think Summit
Yeah,
8
I
or
mean,
something.
they've played in so many. They've played in spurts, right? Like it's not like
Yeah,
they
that's true.
consistently play in tournament all the time. I agree that
Right.
Plup is very hard for AMSA, but I just think the way that people are rushing to call it just a foregone conclusion that AMSA is gonna get it's still AMSA. I don't think
No, yeah.
it's not so hopeless. The way don't even the way that AMSA tweets about it, I'm like, oh, okay, dude, come on.
Yeah, he's like, Plup is not human. It's okay.
Yeah, he says
Or what was his
he
exact
says it's
said?
not human. It's okay. It's like, dude, like you're more gun. Like there's two people that have beaten you way more in the last 2 years, and because of like 1 month where he net played him from Oregon to Vancouver or whatever, he's given up. Like, come on.
I don't know, 25 to
I
2,
love it.
man. That's a big deal.
Edwin, I got one word for you. A grab. You remember that one clip where Plum just like gets back at 170 and he starts chain grabbing him? He's like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, I'd be so mad if I was him right now." A grab.
I will say I've heard I have seen some of those net play friendlies, and it's like really ugly. Like it's not just the Sheik, it's like the Sheik, the Fox, the Samus. I think at one point even the Marth was beating.
What? I have not seen that.
There's some like really cursed footage out there.
You know,
But again, I don't think that translates to a serious offline.
You of all people know what happens if you try and count AMSA out.
Yeah.
You know all too well.
yeah, true. Well, Yarn Yoshi knows all too well. I know that much. We might not agree on who can win the tournament, but we can agree on who's probably not going to win, and it's a young Yoshi main by the name of AMSA. If we talk about everyone's paths here, who like in the top
true.
6 seeds or whatever, the kind of the feasible people who can take a major, it really just seems like someone hated AMSA and created a major for him to lose, right? Like Zane being the person who he really wants to run into, I guess that's better.
That's a hard good draw.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's not who you want to see.
It's funny too because like Cody was
exactly.
registered. It was literally like the actual nightmare of all nightmares for AMSA. And then like he got slightly.
I mean, honestly,
better.
the fact that Cody's
Sinister
not
Six created to destroy AMSA when Cody was around.
God. Yeah, the fact that Cody's not here, you would think would be like amazing for him, but Cody just got replaced with Blood.
And then there's also like Aklo who just beat him too.
Yeah,
God,
it's so rough for AMSA, and I do think that we'll see AMSA do well at some point, right? Does do well mean winning a major? I don't know. Does do well mean like getting top 3 at like the big house or something? Maybe. Who knows? We'll see. But it's one of the sad things when you talk about AMSA is that at the end of the month he will be back in Japan. So like we will not really be seeing him much, and I believe that after he goes back to Japan, I think he's only going to Big House. He was recently confirmed for Santa Paws, but ended up deciding that taking a transatlantic flight all the way to Montgomery, Alabama was probably not the best decision, only to play Cody. So like there's not really a lot of times to see AMSA, and that is a sad thing, right? When AMSA's playing, it is Melee's just better when AMSA's playing. Melee's better when Mango's playing, right? Plup and Wizzy, like all these players, they add so much to the game. I guess I didn't say HBox, who's not here, but we won't read into that too much. But there's so many amazing players here, so it just so happens that all the amazing players who are here are amazing versus AMSA. So I'm not going to pick AMSA. I like the idea of Plup. I like the idea of Zane. I don't know. You know what? You kind of got to back up your crazy picks, right? You sometimes you make a crazy call just so people kind of go, whoa, what is that? You make up something for content. Unfortunately, sometimes your co-host goes, I don't think so. but you got to sometimes you got to back up your crazy picks. So I think we're going to see an immaculate Wizrobe dub here. He's definitely a player who I think is unlikely to win. He's seeded 6th, which I think is probably a bit lower than I would have him, but when you look at the people above him, I think it makes sense. I do think that the 6th seed is just so he can obliterate Amsa, though. I think it's like a ploy to show Amsa it's like, hey, you know how you hate playing Moki and Cody? Did you forget that you hate playing this guy? Hey, don't forget you got destroyed by a couple different players, too. I think like that's a really good matchup for him. And then you get to Moki, who, as we talked about, Moki's an amazing player. Moki very well could win the whole tournament, right? Moki is also a player who, like, is way more active than Wizzy is. But sometimes you just get those events where Wizzy comes out, and unless your name is Plup or Mango, you have no chance. He is hitting everything correctly. He is, hitting every tech chase. He's hitting every edge guard. And sometimes you get those types of things. We haven't seen them play since 2019, which was decidedly in Moki's favor. Decidedly in Wizzy's favor. There was like a Friday night or Four Loco fight night set that went in Moki's favor, but I'm not sure if I'm really willing to like say anything's cut and dry when it comes to that. I think if that matchup happens, and I do think it's probably likely considering like favor Wizzy over Amsa, I think it's going to be an amazing set. I think what Wizzy needs to avoid is Plup, and it just it's kind of about how much you think Plup is going to be in winners finals. But I don't know. We've seen Zane and Wizzy kind of go back and forth, but really they have not played in a while. Falcon was kind of that thing where like it's like, is Gatsu gonna upset Zane? Is none gonna like? We saw a lot of those, but really what we saw a lot of was a lot of sets where Zane destroyed all the top Falcon players. So I do think that it's an uphill battle, but I don't know. There's something about Wizzy. I think that when we talk about all these players who can win majors, there's just like obstacles that are in their way, and not that these don't exist for Wizzy, but like I trust in Wizzy's ability to get past them. And against the field, you mentioned this earlier. I think there's a lot of players like, do the Aklos of the world have a chance at beating Wizzy? And I think it's like, yeah, they definitely could. There's a lot of good players like Salt, Magi, Joshman, Zuppy. You mentioned all those players in addition. And they all the run, like the hypothetical Wizzy run does get a little scary, but I'm gonna call it. Why not? You're trying to save face by calling Zane. Seal, you're trying to live your best life by calling. Yeah, I'll go for gut. I don't know. Balls. What is a Wizzy pick? I don't know what it is. But I'll follow my whatever instinct is on this one. I'm gonna say Wizzy. I think that. It's probably not likely, but I do think that there's a higher chance of this happening than we're probably likely to admit. And I'd love to see it because I'd love to go into the big house with hoping that everyone could go. But like I'd love to go into the big house with all these storylines because I want to see a reinvigorated Plup. I want to see a Wizzy that is able to win tournaments. I want to see. I want to see an Amsa who can beat Foxes. That'd be nice. So I want to see all that, and I think that part of that is Wizzy winning. So I'm going to call Wizzy win here.
Well, hey, Wizzy W. You remember one of the stories that was of Riptide 2022 in top 8? There was a run by a certain player that looked crazy impressive, and he was like maybe a stock or two away from taking 2 huge upsets. That player was S2J. Remember, he defeated Zane in winners at Riptide.
True.
And then he was so close against both Plup and Jmook. Both of those were game 5s. I don't quite remember if the Jmook one was last stock, but the Plup one definitely was. And I was losing my mind. I was like, please, Plup. And I remember seeing, I don't know if I should mention this, but I remember seeing a certain Falcon main in the crowd watching it. And is a friend of mine, for the record. And this person had their head in their hands after Plup barely clutched game 5. They looked so distraught, and I almost felt bad for them for 1 second. And then I remembered that Plup won, and I was like, "Yeah, let's go, let's go." You know what? Too bad if your Falcon hero couldn't do it. I'm here for my Sheik hero.
One thing that I think we need to mention is that, like, when it comes to these tournaments don't always show who is the best player, right? It's like shows who is the best player under certain conditions. And as we go through all these tournaments, these conditions change wildly. We there used to be times when hey, speaking of Plup, right? He lost to a wobbling Ices at 10 a.m. Like these were things that
Got
happened.
destroyed too.
Like
He got like
he
three,
didn't
three
get
and two
destroyed.
stops.
Bananas did destroy him with that one big house. But like, what can happen at these tournaments are can like differ wildly. And I do think one thing that has to be said is that kind of like Shine, Riptide takes a lot of care into making sure that the players, that they can perform at their best. It is something where no one is playing round one on Friday. There's no round one pool before noon on Saturday. They have the ability to, because they don't have as many attendees, they have the ability to kind of make a lot of this focus on the player. And there's like a ton of setups. I went last year. I never had a issue finding an open setup to just kind of dick around, play Ness or whatever, whatever weird
That's like your
bullshit I
thing
was
these
on.
days.
The Ness
You
is
and Kirby
current. The
Kaze.
Ness is current day. Yeah, I don't know what bullshit I was subjecting people to last year, but regardless, like it is a major that I think, if we talk about players who fluctuate wildly in their play, like who have immaculate peaks but don't always get there, like Wizzy or Plup, that this is a tournament where they could do very well. And if you talk about someone like Zane, who is able to hit his peak very easily, like that edge that he has might be nullified, right? It's an interesting thing to see. I'm really looking forward to what happens, because I think that more than almost any tournament, I do think Riptide is able to give the players kind of like a really neutral playing field. They're not like waiting all day to play their sets. They don't have like huge breaks or whatever. They do try to put a lot of thought into it. Not that other majors don't. I just think that there's a lot of different factors that go into Riptide being able to try to kind of attain that ideal more than others. So we'll see. I think it's going to be a really, really interesting tournament. I think there's going to be a lot of insane sets in like round one, and there's going to be fucking battles in round two. There's so much shit that we didn't even mention, right? We barely mentioned JCam versus Flash being a round one thing, insane. Like there's so many things here that we didn't even get a chance to mention, and that's just how it is, right? Riptide is one of those tournaments that kind of time and time again feels like it's a little bit of like a little brother to some of these really big series, but I don't think there's been a bad Riptide in terms of like anything, right? They are well-run tournaments, good experiences for the players, good experiences for the viewers, and they all end up having just like a pretty insane depth of player talent. And just looking at the bracket and looking at everything here, I don't think that Riptide 2023 will be any different. So I'm very excited to see how that ends up. So Seal, you've been around the block before. You know how things are done. You know that we've got some questions for you. You actually yourself are a question superstar. So, by the virtue of
That's
having
where you're
you
going
here,
with
we probably can assume that the questions are going to be worse than they are normally, because you are not here to ask yourself a question. Unless there's a question that you want to ask yourself. But we did get a chance to talk to the patron channel in between various other topics of conversation that could pop up this week in a patron channel. But we actually did get some pretty good questions from the patrons for you. So Edwin, I think you might have one.
Yeah, I do. This one is from Stock. So, Seal, given your status of living all over the Midwest, how do you feel the region has progressed in your time playing? And what do you foresee in the future?
Yeah, what I would say is I feel this may just be on account of me being a lot more familiar with the scene as years go on, but I feel the depth in the Midwest is just ridiculous these days. Of course, we have like these players that barely travel, barely get to go to majors like Ossify, Flash, even like 100 grand up in Minnesota. Um, so like personally, I feel like the depth has really evolved. I think the field in the Midwest is just a lot stronger. Like you can go to say like mid lane melee or something like the Chicago local, and the whole top like 24 or whatever final bracket they do will be like these are all pretty good players. Like you can't sleep on anyone there. So that's at least how I feel. I think that it may also have to do with the sort of size of the overall scene, sort of like shrinking down a bit and being like more dedicated people are the people that are still around today as compared to when I started just shy of 9 years ago now. And yeah, so I would say that's one of the main things that I feel has changed, but could be on account of various outside factors. And then the other part of the question was like, where do I see the Midwest going? Was that right?
I don't think so. I think the question was just about the what have you noticed.
Oh, I think you said something about the future. Maybe I'm
I mean, you can
mistaken
answer
though.
that if you want. Like the
Sure.
Also,
can't
what are your
hurt.
thoughts on Future, the rapper?
He made Mask Off, and I remember hearing that Edwin kept repeating the hook from that at like Royal Flush or something.
Percocets. Molly Percocets. Yeah, Edwin
I
said
wasn't
that
there.
approximately 450 times in a Royal Flush hotel room, which was the first time I met him in person. Yeah, a very, very good memory, Seal.
I don't know why that was the first thing that came to mind. I just remember like you
And
mentioning
one of
that
the
like
more famous
like
things about Future is that
yeah.
Edwin repeated that line, of course.
Oh, absolutely. That's like got to be at least in the top five. Um,
Seal,
okay,
I
so
have
let's.
another one for you. If
Well, I'm trying
what?
to think still about the future of the
Oh, right,
Midwest.
right. About
Yeah.
future. Sorry.
Um. Well, here's one thing I think. I think that there's going to be so Midwest already is actually here. Let me add something else to the first part of the question. So about like how the Midwest is developed. I think the Midwest has become the region of regionals. That sounds a bit silly, but I think that the idea of the Midwest regional is a very like well-known sort of thing where you'll have like a tournament in Chicago or at like Purdue or in Madison, in Columbus, or just all over the Midwest in Minnesota, and you'll just get say like 100 to 200 people that all drove out like somewhere between 1 to like 7, or if in the case of like preeminent driving 11 hours to go to Botany, like you
Oh
could
my.
you could see that kind of thing. I really feel like that's become a very like established thing over the last few years, where the Midwest we don't have that many majors. The big houses here, of course, in Detroit, that's like the one of the biggest tournaments, but that's more of like the super major sort of thing. And we now have Riptide before we had Smash and Splash as sort of like I would say the Midwest major. But beyond that, it's really all about the regionals. I think each state has their own regional or even multiple regionals, and we get people traveling out to them, and I think it's great. And I think that's something that especially developed over the time when I've been in the scene. Because I just remember when I would think of regionals, it would be like, well, you got your Rubicons every month, etc. And then where I think this is going is that I think some of these regional series are going to start to run bigger and bigger events. Now, one of the main ones that comes to mind is Minnesota. They had their monthly series, and they are developing that Wisdom Melee. And I've heard rumblings of something even bigger in the works. I've heard that for a while, I will say, but I'm sure it'll come to fruition. I've also heard similar things, similar big events hoped for to be coming to Chicago, which I'm very excited about. We've had stuff like Combo Breaker actually being the biggest tournament in the biggest by size tournament in Chicago history. I'm pretty sure bigger than like the first two Smash and Splashes. I think in terms of melee numbers, I could be wrong. Definitely beat out like Eden and other such events, but I think that the Midwest will go from a region of regionals to a region of regionals, and also some of those bigger like not necessarily majors, but whatever you call it in between a major and a
We still
regional.
haven't figured out a
That's
word for that yet.
no, we
Yeah,
haven't. Edwin will
it's been
call it
like
a
20
national.
years.
National.
We'll
We
get
call it
there
the Nationals.
eventually.
No, we don't.
But that's what I see as being one of the more changing parts of the scene.
Seal, I have another one for you. This is from OG Melee Stats member YCZ. Uh, if you could do commentary, or if you could do a block with any commentator, past or present, who would it be?
Well, I mean, one person comes to mind immediately. My personal commentary goat. That would be fellow Chicago and also greater Midwest legend of Webbs. Also, great friend too. Love that guy. He is one of my biggest inspirations for commentary. I remember watching his TAFO talk.
Oh yeah.
Like when I was in high school, they did a TAFO talk about commentary. I still recommend that to people today that are interested in doing commentary. A lot of Webb's thoughts definitely
He
still
was
hold
a big
up.
commentary
And
nerd. I think he had like a Google Doc or something, right? It was
yeah.
like the guide to commentary.
Oh, really? I actually don't think I
Oh,
saw that.
maybe it wasn't supposed to be revealed.
Oh, it's not.
No, I think
Okay.
no, I'm joking. I think he did have some musings on commentary. If
Oh,
it,
yeah.
I don't know if they were like if it was a guide or if it was just like in notes. But I've talked to him before about commentary. And he
Yeah.
used to be a like rewatch every single block. Make notes on it. Like he used to be huge
Hmm.
into that. So definitely a
Yeah.
very great source to hear
And I
any
think he
commentary feedback
said,
from.
like in his college, he did, I can't remember if it was like radio or something like that. Um, but I remember him saying that he did something in college that he felt translated well to it. And I've always just thought, again, like we've sort of both discussed, he's very thoughtful about commentary. He puts effort into it. I remember I did commentate with him one single time, which was we did a couple sets at NMG Near Mint Games, which was a local that happened in Chicago. And I remember at one point I like said something, and he sort of like wanted to spur me on to actually say more. So he's like, "And why does that matter?" And then I thought about it, and I remember in the moment I like actually froze up a bit. I was like, "Wait, what am I? I'm just saying things. Am I just saying things and they don't even matter?" And then I just remember thinking about that, and I was like, "Well, maybe I should be more thoughtful about things and like, why do they matter? Why am I saying something on commentary? Is there like an actual constructive purpose to it, or am I just like saying it because I thought of it and there's nothing
Mm,
else to it?" Um, so yeah, I would say definitely Webb's. It's always a treat when we get to have him on commentary. He did a bunch at Shine,
yeah,
thankfully. He's hired for that. I'm sure we'll see him at Big House too. I'd be
would love
truly
to see him. Yeah.
shocked. Yeah, because Big House is really where like he got his start in commentary. So being the Midwest legend he is, of course, I'm sure they'll have him there. So yeah, I would say doing like a full commentary block, not just like crowded around like a Blue Yeti at a local, would be great. I would love to do like a major or even just a regional top eight or something, but I don't know if he's doing too much of those these days.
Lovely, lovely answer. Any answer that mentions webs is obviously a very good one. Now, I've got a question for you. I'm wondering why Edwin had two in a row when we usually do one and one, but I've got one here for you. This is tradition for people who consider themselves Chicagoans. I know you consider yourself a Chicago boy. You you say I am Seal Chicago boy. You say that a lot. This one is from Curly W. Margot. Margot gets the classic Chicago question. Chicago hot dog ingredients tier list?
Yeah, that's kind of tough. I don't know if I can do a proper tier list. I can probably try and
Do you want
list
to
them in
start name?
order.
Yeah, I was going to say, you want
Yeah,
to
just
start
list
naming
them in
them?
order favorite. So let's think here. Am I including the hot dog itself, and am I including the bun?
The bun, which includes.
Poppy
Okay,
seeds,
there
of
you go.
course. But
That is
am I
viewer
including
discretion,
those?
or
Or?
I guess answer discretion. That's up to you.
I think I will actually, because like the poppy seed bun is a special part of it, as is like the jumbo Vienna beef sort of special hot dog. Hmm, where to start though? It's so
You've got the
difficult.
sport
There's so
peppers,
many. Yeah, there's.
neon
You know,
relish.
one thing I actually really like. Actually, no, I'll say it. Number one, I'll go with mustard. You can't beat
Mm,
mustard. When I eat a hot dog at home, I don't often make it a whole Chicago hot dog, and I'll just put mustard on it, and then I'll be happy with that. Or I'll put mustard and relish, and I'll just be happy with that. So I got to go with the classic yellow mustard as number one. Um, Number two, I think this may actually be a bit of a hot take, but I think number two, I will go with actually the pickle spear. I actually really, really enjoy that whenever I'm eating a Chicago hot dog. The only one tough part about it, though, is trying to get a bite that includes both the pickle spear and enough of the hot dog. But when you get that perfect bite, oh, it's so good. The pickle spear, I think it while it's not the easiest part of the hot dog to consume, I think that is one of the best.
Sometimes the best things aren't easy.
Yes, that's well said, Weeb. Well said.
That only applies to Chicago hot dogs.
So let's see. Number 3. I think I'll jump to the hot dog itself. I think the all beef jumbo hot dog is something that's really nice. And I think that like it's definitely different from just a regular hot dog. A regular hot dog where it's like kind of skinny and you don't get quite as much like juice to it. You know what I'm saying? It's not quite as much of a bite. So I'll say that would be number 3. Number 4, I think I'll actually go with the relish for number 4. The relish is really tasty. It adds a bit more of that like pickle sort of flavor. Not quite as pickle-y. Of course, it's a bit more sweet than that. But when you're all out of pickle, sometimes you eat the pickle. Wait, actually no. I'm taking back the relish. I'm going to sport peppers. Sport peppers comes before the relish. I really like the spice that the sport peppers add. They're also kind of a little bit difficult to eat though, because like sometimes you try and bite one and you just want to get half of it in one bite, so that way you can get like the next half in another bite. But you don't really. It's kind of difficult to bite clean through it, so like you end up bringing the whole pepper into your mouth, and that can make it a little difficult. But again, if you're able to get that half of sport pepper bite. And that's the thing about the Chicago hot dog. You got to get the perfect bite where you get like just the right amount of each ingredient, and it's just perfect when you do. So I'll go with the sport pepper, then I'll go with the relish, then I'm gonna go for the diced white onions. They don't add too much flavor, honestly, because there's already a lot going on with the relish and the mustard and sport peppers, but they are still nice to have them there. And then I'll go with the bun next. I would actually say the bun's not that special. The poppy seeds are iconic, but I don't really think they make things taste all that different. So, but of course, a bun is a bun, right? I mean, it's delicious. We all love some bread. Unless you're on a keto diet, then
what kind of bun are we talking about, though, Seal? Are we talking about?
It's a poppy seed bun.
It's a poppy seed bun. Come on, man.
Yeah, like it's a poppy seed.
We've been very clear about this.
You gotta know. Edwin,
right, since you got interrupted, maybe you should start from the beginning.
Yeah, you're right. So the first one, did I have mustard first? So okay, no worries. There's only 2 items left here. The next one I will go with is the tomato. The tomato definitely doesn't add. So when I said about the onions, where they don't add all that much flavor because there's already a lot going on, is dying of laughter at this. He can't take this art seriously. He just doesn't get it.
He doesn't. He doesn't understand.
I think he's muted.
He is muted. He's in a sunken
It's a hot dog. Oh my god!
It's more than just a hot dog.
He doesn't get it.
You don't get it, dude.
Edwin, are you going? No, wait. Neither of us are going to Big House. Also, it's in Detroit. Edwin, you got to come to there. You know the Chicago event. You got to come to that, and we're gonna get a Chicago hot dog.
Maybe a special mid lane or something.
Do they have vegan?
Well, no. You know the event though. The event that's. I can't name it right now, but you know, in the summer.
Oh, yeah.
I'll DM you.
No, I know what you're talking about.
He doesn't know. He's acting like he knows. He's not clued in. Anyway, we've got the tomato. Tomato adds a lot of color.
Yeah, so the tomato.
Other than that,
yeah, I will say though the color is nice. It makes the hot dog look very
first,
pretty,
they say,
and we gotta appreciate that. It's true. And then, of course, lastly, but is something you can never forget, or you will be made fun of, is the celery salt. So you got to have the celery salt on the hot dog. To be honest, I will say it. I wouldn't notice it if it was missing. I'm going to just say that, but you got to name it still. It's part of the hot dog, and that
celery salt is kind of like when you're doing the Sporkle quiz for top 100 players, and you have to put like pecan vodka or whatever. It's like a chump check, right?
You got to get it out of the way.
You say celery salt. Like
You
everyone,
either know it or you don't.
yeah, you either know it or you don't. Well, Seal, I've had the pleasure of meeting you. Well, I don't even remember when. Maybe it was at Shine 2019. It was
That was when we
pre-pandemic.
first met. Yeah.
And I've had the pleasure of talking to you a lot online, getting to see you a lot in person. And this was easily the most enthused I ever saw you about any subject ever.
Any subject? There's no way. That's not true. You know that's not true.
You spent a long time going over the list. I mean, I agree with you on a lot of them, but you spent a long time. Anyway, it is great talking to you about hot dogs. And I'm actually going to kind of segue this because we've got Touching Grass. You are a
Wait
fan
a
of the
minute.
podcast.
What? It's named? It's official?
Well, unofficially known as Touching Grass. Of course, officially known as an unnamed segment. Well, officially unnamed, I guess. It's not officially known as unnamed. Well, regardless, known by the fans as Touching Grass. This is the segment where we talk about stuff that's been going on in our lives that is outside of Melee. Since we last spoke, I've not been up to a lot. I've been a little busy with some other stuff, but I think one of the things that I got to do was sit around and enjoy a nice hot dog with the family. Labor Day obviously was around. I got to spend a few days hanging out with some family members, which is nice because people have been on vacation recently. I got to see kind of some of my extended family, which I don't always get to see. There's a new baby in the family that my cousin just had. I feel like I could have worded that in a way that sounded more human. A baby that my cousin just had. Okay. But it was a really good experience to get to, kind of hang out with some family, talk to people. My sister and her family just went to Canada, so they all were like, "Did you see this when you went to Canada? Did you see this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I saw it. I saw that. I didn't go in the CN Tower, but I saw it." But yeah, it's always fun to get to talk to family about some of that stuff. My nieces were very excited to brag to me about how they went in a helicopter, and they were like, "You've never been in one."
I just want to say the CN Tower is so expensive. It's crazy. I went there. We like walked over there with some of my non-melee playing friends at Yamal, and it was like 50 or 40 bucks or something to go up there. I was like,
That's probably like $10 American though.
that's true. It is Monopoly money. It is Monopoly money.
But yeah, simple thing. No, it's not cool. It's not spicy. But all I did was I got to hang out with some family, which was very fun. Edwin, last time we talked to you, you said your Touching Grass segment was hanging out. Was hanging out with family. So I kind of stole your luster a little bit. What have you been up to since we last spoke?
I've been reading a ton about football. The NFL season's coming up, so I've just I still haven't caught up on every single thing, but I just recently finished the PFF NFL QB guide. That was pretty awesome. It's always.
Do you know how many downs there are?
Piece.
I haven't caught up on everything. I'm still learning.
Yeah, I'm still learning. I'm still learning what a touchdown is. Yeah, I've just I've really been enjoying reading about football. Those of you that have known me have known that was like my first love to competition. Just watching American football. I'm just really excited for the season to start. That's going to be dominating my next 4 months. I just love talking about football. Wheat and I have been talking about football a lot more often. We made Wheat actually DM'd me a while ago asking me like, "Hey, like check this list of the best quarterbacks."
But yeah.
For I guess it wasn't that long ago. Of talking about the best quarterbacks for each team since 2000. So basically our lifetime of like watching football, and it put me down this big trip down memory lane of all these names that I forgot about, but all these names that I also remembered, but like learned something new about in the process of just researching them to see if my memory matched up with reality. Just a lot of fun. I'm just pretty excited for the next 4 months, especially because I'm gonna be home a lot more. So yeah, I'm just gonna be watching a ton of football tomorrow. I'm going to one of my best friends' places for a football party. We're just gonna watch the opening game. So I'm gonna be bringing some snacks and cooking some dinner and bringing it along to his place. So I'm pretty excited.
Very cool. Any snack in particular you were cooking?
Well, I'm gonna be bringing snacks and cooking. I want to bring pizzas over. Like,
Well, to be
and
clear,
then
I'm not cooking snacks.
yeah, I'm not cooking. Yeah, but I'll be bringing pizza. I'll be making pizza at home, bringing it over, and probably just bringing a ton of popcorn.
Pizza can be considered a snack. Just want to be
What kind
clear.
of pizza though? That's important.
Chicago
There's
deep dish.
That
just
would be
cheese,
hard to make at home.
a regular cheese for one of them. I tend to make a bunch of like smaller sized ones and then one with just like vegetables on it,
What kind of vegetables? Like what do you go for?
like olives,
Onions and
onions,
peppers?
peppers, mushrooms,
Not bad.
garlic.
Tomato.
Almost a supreme there.
Dude.
Pickle spear.
Tomato, relish. Oh god,
I don't know about relish.
Mustard on a pizza.
Honestly,
That's
it's probably better than that fucking Swedish pizza with the curry powder and the bananas on it.
Did you have any of that in
what?
in
No, I didn't.
Nesta?
I didn't.
Aw.
Yeah,
I
he
would've
was too.
tried it if I was
He was too afraid to try a lot of things. I
We've
heard.
been a rush like no other.
Oh my god! No,
One of the
dude.
many things he chickened out from trying.
Let's not go there.
I got to.
Seal,
I
what
got
have
to-
you been up to?
I got the pleasure to talk to Nun at SmashCon, and he mentioned how he housed Armada before like Gommel or something one time, or some or kind of I don't know, some tournament. That doesn't matter. But he housed Armada, and Armada was drunk. They were both drinking. And Armada was like, "Let's go get a Swedish pizza, man." He didn't say it in that voice, but he was like,
Good impression.
that's what Armada really speaks when all the cameras are gone. But Nun was like basically was like, they don't have that. They can't make this. Like, you can't just go up to a pizza place and be like, "Hey, can you make me a Swedish pizza? Yeah, get the curry sauce and the bananas out, please." Like, it's not a thing they have at the ready. So he had to explain that to Armada. Anyway, Seal, what have you been up to recently?
Yeah, well, in my free time, I've been doing two things. First is the usual, which is catching up on Melee tournaments, so won't be talking about that since that's Melee related.
True,
The other
true.
thing is I've just recently, like literally last week, started my studying period for my next financial licensing exam. I do work in finance, and there are many different exams that you can pass in finance to get certain licenses. These licenses just basically allow you to legally do stuff, because obviously it's a very regulated industry. So I'm just starting my my most recent licensing study period. It's going to take me like 3 months to do it. Oh my god. Anyway, I lost my train of thought. No. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so it's gonna take me like 3 months to do it. I'm sorry, Chroma's killing me in chat right now. So it's gonna take me like 3 months to do it since I have to do it on my own time. It's not, I don't get like time at work to do it, so it kind of sucks. I have to like clock out of work and then spend another hour like reading this 560 page book and then answering a bunch of multiple choice questions to practice for it. But you know, it's part of life. You got to do all these prerequisites in order to advance yourself. But that's probably
You could
not
also
very-
mooch off other people.
Well, I could do that, but in my field, I'm pretty sure that would be illegal. And FINRA's got my prints, so I'm not trying to. They took all 10 of my fingerprints. That's
Damn,
so
all 10 of them.
all 10 of them. And you know how I
You
feel about
should
privacy.
have tricked them. You should have given them your middle finger twice instead of your ring finger.
You're right. I could have had them. Could have had my safety. And then I'll just use my ring finger like to commit all crimes.
Oh yeah, you'll steal the diamond from the middle of the museum with just your ring finger.
No, I'm just balancing it on my ring finger the whole time.
I mean, a diamond on someone's ring finger. I've heard that one before.
You have a point. Something a little more interesting though, that because I know the average person when they hear finance, their head starts to droop down and they start to fall asleep. Is that I am currently planning with my parents a trip to China.
Oh, nice.
However, there is one unfortunate downside about that trip. I will be returning during the weekend of the Big House. And that means I will not be in attendance of the Big House. There's something cursed about this tournament series for me. I tried to go 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. None of the years worked for various reasons. Finally did make it last year. And this year, unfortunately, I will not be going again. But there's something very cool still about getting to see another part of the world that is so foreign. I'm sure I'm going to eat a lot of great food. I'm going to see a bunch of stuff. And there is a very small chance that I turn up on Sunday of Big House because one of the main flights to and from China actually leaves from Detroit and returns to Detroit, of course.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and so, yeah, there is a universe where I fly back in on Saturday because I would have to anyway, because otherwise the jet lag would kill me at work on Monday. And I just show up to Big House on Sunday, insanely jet lagged out of my mind, and just like watch like top 8 or top 32 or whatever, say hi to people, because that would be a lot of fun still. But I will say that's like a 10% chance right now. So for those of you who are attending Big House, you will likely not see me unless.
Well, they might not see you, but where else can they find you online?
That's true. You know, I why'd you laugh at that?
Yeah, why did you say
Let me
that's true? Where can they find you
What?
online is not that's not the kind of prompt
guess
that would
so.
get a that's true response.
All right, you know
Yeah.
what? I'll say.
You just got owned by Edwin Budding.
Damn it! I almost made it through the episode without getting owned. It's all right. I'll have to get my revenge at the next major we're both at when we play another best of 5.
You're gonna post to
okay.
5. I was like,
No, but I feel silly even like mentioning my Twitter because I think like the only times I've posted there in the last like 2 months are either quote retweeting a commentary graphic, quote retweeting the Melee Stats post I'm going to be here, or tweeting the stream when I'm commentating. I legitimately think those are the only things I've done. But I mean, hey, if you want to know what I'm doing, that's how you find out, I guess. But I don't really post like very actively there these days. But it is SSB_seal. I also have the same on YouTube and Twitch, which I'm not super active on either. I did post the Morse versus J-Move Game 3 though. That's only footage you can find is on my YouTube channel there. So
nice, cornering the market.
yeah, yeah, that's about it, I guess. I'll say if people are looking for commentary, send me a message. I would love to commentate your tournament.
Well, Seal, people might not, people might not be looking for you necessarily, but they'll find you in the comments
true.
of most YouTube videos.
You can't hide.
Speaking of which, if you want to find us on YouTube, these episodes go up on the Melee Stats archive. You can see our long-form videos over at Melee Stats. If you want to catch us while we're live, twitch.tv/Melee Stats. Our Twitter is Melee Stats Pod. We have daily results reporting and other stuff like that. We've got MeleeStats.co, which has weekly articles such as Monday Marty Marth, where the guy who writes it is wrong, apparently, about every single prediction. But we also have When's Melee, so you can find what tournaments are happening when every single weekend. And if you love everything we do and you want to support us in the best way possible, patreon.com/MeleeStats. Seal, wonderful to get to speak to you. Wonderful to get to hear all 14 minutes of your thoughts on the Chicago hot dog. I hope that we can continue this conversation in person at Riptide. Very excited to go. Very excited to be seeing you there. And thank you, everyone, for watching. A very fun episode. Talking about a tournament that I going into it, I wasn't sure if there was a lot to talk about, but ended up having a really great time just going over all the stuff here. And as we talked about, it's going to be a pretty great tournament to watch. I think it's very easy to underestimate how much the storylines going into this, but it really's got a lot going on. So we will be back next week to talk about everything that happens. I'm sure whatever happens, it's going to be a great tournament, so I'm very excited to come back and talk about it next week. We will see you then. Peace.
See you guys.